What's up, degenerates? This is Locked In, and I'm your host, Mason Cameron, at PFF_Mace on Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishal Gupta, at Vishal_Gupta95 on Twitter. The big day is here.
Playoffs.
It is time to get started with the playoffs. I'm excited to dive into it. We're breaking down every single game in the wild card round. We're going to give you some input, some insight on what way you guys should be leaning and which bets you should be targeting. I'm really excited to get started. How you doing today?
Doing great. Going to be an absolutely fabulous weekend. Next few weeks, to be honest, with the playoffs kicking off. We're going to have some fantastic matchups every week till we get to the Super Bowl. Super excited. So, yeah, let's jump in there.
There's going to be some really good ones, and we got a bunch of really good ones this week. We're going to dive right into it, not waste any time so that we can break down every single game for you guys, because usually we start with the Thursday game, but thank God we didn't have any Thursday games. So here we go. We are starting off with the very first matchup of Wild Card weekend, and this is the afternoon slate or the evening slate, about 4:30, I think, on Saturday. So make sure you guys set your calendars. We have the Chargers heading into the Texans heading into Houston to take on DeMeco Ryans' Texans. The Chargers, 2.5 point road favorites here. Game total on this one about 42.5. I know that we're both leaning towards the spread. I have a little bit of a read on the game total too here. It's just a really interesting matchup because we have Jim Harbaugh, who came in here his first year with the Chargers. He revamped them, gave them an 11-6 record in their first playoff berth at the helm. And now they're hoping to feed off of his playoff successes. In his 4 seasons in the NFL, he's had 3 go to the conference championship. That's incredible. He's had a ton of playoff success, and they're hoping to ride that here, but it's not alone. DeMeco Ryans' team, back-to-back division championships in his first 2 seasons. They are hosting another playoff game. This team won a playoff game last year, securing a victory 45-14 over the Browns. Absolutely demolished them. So this is what we're going to want to see with them moving forward, and they're going to want to come in here and defend their home turf. Now, granted, that team that the Texans produced last year felt a little bit different than this team that they have this year, whereas the Chargers feel like they have a lot of momentum at their back right now. Some betting trends here to keep an eye on. LA stands tied atop the NFL with an impressive 70.6 cover rate. That is a 12-4-1 against the spread record. And that's due largely to their success when they're laying points on the road. They've actually had to do it quite a bit this year. They hold a 6-1 record against the spread doing that. So conversely, Houston, they maintain a 7-9-1 mark against the spread. Not the best, but they've been favored in quite a few games this year. However, they haven't done terribly well at home. They are 3-5 against the spread. Tell me, what are you seeing in this one? Which way are you leaning here?
Yeah, I think this is probably the ugliest game on the slate, but it's still going to be a pretty solid football game. But I think you just have to take the Chargers in this one, especially if you can get them under the 3 and just get them in -2.5, which I know you can still get at some places. Well, you just have to start with Justin Herbert. He is playing phenomenal over the last few weeks. In his last 3 games, 7 touchdowns, 1 interceptions. Chargers have scored 34, 40, and 34 points respectively in those 3 games. He has a passer rating of over 110 in all of those games. So he is playing lights out football. I know a couple of those came against some subpar defenses and the Patriots and the Raiders, but there was also a Thursday nighter against the vaunted Denver defense in there as well, where he played phenomenal football in the second half of that game. So I know this is a good Houston defense. They have a lot of talented guys on that side of the football, and their numbers look good on that end. But I think Justin Herbert is going to be the best player on the field, regardless of who has the ball, and he's going to be able to carry this Chargers team to a victory. I think a big boost for the Chargers offense is the return of J.K. Dobbins has really helped out their rushing game, which they desperately needed. They've had over 115 rushing yards in each of their last 3 games. Dobbins has been back for their last 2. and it's been a big help. I think it's been like a huge rotation in there, just churning different guys in and out in that backfield. And I think the only guy who's had sustained success has been J.K. Dobbins. So him being there is going to be very helpful. And I think the big issue for Houston is just their offense is not playing well this year. I know they have 10 wins, so it's like, how can they not have a good offense? But if you just look deeper past some of the surface level numbers, you can see that this is just not a highly efficient offense. I think you have to start with their efficiency numbers on early downs has been like horrific. They're in the bottom, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 in the league in terms of success on first and second downs, and that is forcing them into just a ton of third and longs, and they're just putting CJ Stroud in these positions where he has to do everything for this offense for them to be able to succeed. They rank 20th in third down conversion percentage in the NFL, which is, okay, but I mean, it's not bottom third or anything like that. But if you want to be a successful playoff team and win some of these playoff games, that number has to be significantly higher than 20th in the NFL. So they're just not getting it done. They're not putting enough around him right now to support things. They're not rushing the ball very well either. I think I saw something this week where they have the fewest third down rushing conversions in the NFL. That means they are not getting to third and shorts where they have the opportunity to run the football. It's all just third and medium, third and longs where it's obvious that they're going to throw the ball, and it's just not working out very well. So give me the Chargers in this one. I think they have the advantage on both sides of the ball in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head is when they can't run the ball in third and short, or they can't get themselves into third and manageable, it's really hampered this team because they do not have the horses to just fire away in the passing game like they have in the past. Obviously, some injuries. You got the Tank Dell injury. You got the Stephon Diggs injury. Nico Collins had an injury this season that kept him out with his hamstring. So it's been an up and down year for them. And you can particularly see that offensively when you look at some of those numbers. This is a team that scored 2 points against Baltimore a few weeks ago.
That was bad.
Now, that's at home. That wasn't just in Baltimore. That's at home. So that's a tough look for them. I think right now, when you look at kind of the recent trends for how Houston has been playing since the start of December, they're 2-2-1 against the spread. Nothing overly impressive. 1-1 at home. So it's really just an up and down thing for them. Whereas if you look at what the Chargers have been able to do over the last month plus since the start of December, they are 5-1 against the spread with big covers against Kansas City. Obviously, the big game against Denver. And, they had some throwaway games in there, but blew out New England, blew out Vegas. Like, this is a team that is poised to produce well and ride the momentum that Jim Harbaugh's been able to give them. So I have a strong inkling that they are not going to be going home at the end of this one at all. I completely agree. And something else that when you talk about it, so if you guys haven't obviously already gained an inkling of who we're going to be taking, we are both leaning towards the Chargers -2.5 on the road here. Of course, I have a feeling that by the time the game gets closer to kickoff, we're going to see that line move towards 3. So if you can, go ahead and shop around, get in early. Like you said, V, in most places it is up to 3, but if you do look around, you can go ahead and find it at 2.5, and that is what you want. At 3, I'm going to take a look at it. At 3.5, I might fade it just because I want either the push value there at 3, or I want to be under that 3 and have my ability to more easily cover that number. And then another way that I'm leaning is over 41.5. Frankly, I think that this is a good opportunity for this game to go over. This is a bit of a low number. I know when you look at what Houston has done defensively, they're a pretty strong team. They have great edge rushing ability. Danielle Hunter, probably a Pro Bowl snub there. Will Anderson, you could make an argument as he's a Pro Bowl snub as well. But they match up pretty well with what the Chargers are going to do offensively in terms of they're really strong at tackle. So in pass pro, that's going to kind of be a wash on both ends. But if you look at where this game is going to come down to, it's going to be coming down to that secondary play. Houston has a great secondary. We all know that. They're excellent out back there. Can turn the ball over at will. And if Justin Herbert is going to make do, he's going to need to find his open receivers. He's going to need to lean on some of his playmakers. And that's been a bit of a trouble for them at some points. When they do get behind, they can't necessarily always storm back just because they don't have the big playability out there. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on in this one. But I think at the end of the day, like you said, Justin Herbert is the best player on the field. And that is going to be a game changer. That is a difference maker when we get into the postseason. And I'm really excited to see that. So another way that I'm leaning on this one is over the 41.5. Excuse me. It looks like it's up to 42 now. I think I'd take it at 42.5. I might start, seeing what I have as options, but I really do like 41.5 if you could get it or if you got it earlier in the week. And a lot of the reason being is because this Houston team just has not produced offensively, and they're not producing overs as a result. It looks like in their last 5, they have produced 3 unders, and those are at pretty modest numbers, 45, 46. 47 is a little bit higher there. The only overs they made were on lower game totals like this one, 42.5 specifically against Kansas City, and over 36.5 in week 18. They still managed to do that. So that's where I'm leaning. And when you look at what the Chargers have done, they've had overs in each of their last 4. So I think that that's a pretty simplistic number for them to hit, and I like it.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, all right. Let's see what the next game on the list is here. Ooh, that one did not reload. Okay. Sorry for the flashbang, everybody. Next game on the list here is the prime time Saturday matchup. Pittsburgh at Baltimore. Minus 9.5 for Baltimore at home. 43.5 points on the game total here. What else is there to say? We saw this game play out not too long ago. What week was it? 16? Just a few weeks ago. 16.
Like 4 days before Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah, in Baltimore. We lost some money on that game. I took Pittsburgh. I thought they were going to be better.
I took the under. That did not hit.
So, now we've learned from our mistakes. Baltimore's the real deal. 34-17. They absolutely whooped this team the last time they played. We have recency bias. It was only 3 games ago. So I have a good feel on this one that I'm actually liking Baltimore at minus 8.5. And I know that you are actually potentially leaning the other way, and we'll get into that here in a second. I also have a little like on the game total here, but let's just talk about this game a little bit. It's going to be a good one. It's been over a decade since these two teams have faced off in the playoffs. The last meeting, I think it said 2014, which is quite a bit ago. And the Ravens won that one. So I'm of the thinking as well that they're going to have another repeat dominating performance as week 16. And when you look at the other sideline, this is kind of what's drawing me to Baltimore. This is a huge number. And a lot of times in the playoffs, if you're getting over 7, teams just aren't covering. But I think there's a true disparity here right now. Mike Tomlin's team has just been shaky over the end of the season. Disappointing playoff record as well. 8-10 for Mike Tomlin. And their last win came back in 2016. So I don't know. This team's been bounced from the last 3 wildcard appearances. And just given what we've seen from Baltimore, it's it's night and day. Baltimore's been clicking. They're closing out the year with 4 straight covers as 6-point or more favorites. And this team is familiar with sizable postseason favorites. Last season, they covered a 10-point spread over Houston was it the divisional round?
Yeah.
The divisional round. I wrote that wrong in my notes. In the divisional round. So I think that when you see this team, they're poised to make the long march to the Super Bowl. I think that this is probably one of the teams that I would be betting to make the Super Bowl, to win the conference, as well as potentially win the Super Bowl. So I'm up there with taking them at minus 8.5. It looks like I actually took them at minus 9.5, and you can get them as low as 8.5 on DraftKings. Shout out DraftKings for that massive swing there. Gonna save everybody a bunch of money on that one. And we just have to talk about what Pittsburgh's done. They started off so hot against the spread. And now they've sputtered to 1-3 against the spread in the last 4 games to close out the year. They were 7-point dogs against Baltimore in a I get that they were on the road, but this is a divisional game. It was a game they had to have, and they still didn't cover 7.
Yeah.
I'm not super scared away at 8.5 or whatever we're going to end up getting it at. So that's the way that I'm leaning here. I'm excited to watch some of the high profile matchups. There's a lot of really, really good players playing in this one that got some season accolades here. Derrick Henry was named PFF's best runner. TJ Watt was named PFF's best run defender. And that's going to be a matchup I'm going to want to see a lot. I think when you do see that too as well, Derrick Henry had a huge game the last time these two teams played. I would expect another really big one for him. He's had a great, great season. So I'm excited to see this one play out. I'm going to lean towards that -8.5 on Baltimore. But you were leaning towards Pittsburgh. If we can get that number a little bit higher, the 9.5, the 10 range, what are you seeing in this one that makes you lean that direction?
Well, I'll just start and say this is probably my big stay away game of the entire slate. I just don't feel great about any side in this game. It's just numbers are too big for me on both the spread and the totals to feel comfortable betting either side. But if I had to make a pick, I think I would put a small lean on Pittsburgh. I know it has been bad. They're on a 4-game losing streak, and it has just been pretty abysmal to watch. They failed to score more than 17 points in any of those 4 games during this losing streak. Russ has just 4 touchdowns in that span and has been sacked 14 times. He has not played well. But I think despite their struggles, like if we go back to that last Pittsburgh-Baltimore game, I think Pittsburgh truly was competitive in that game despite the final score being 34-17. Russ had 2 just absolutely killer turnovers. One was that fumble near the red zone when they had a chance to go up 14-7, and then he had the late pick 6 that really sealed the deal. So I know those are really tough turnovers, and it's been an issue for them these last few games. But if they can figure out some way to clean that up, then I think this game can stay competitive, because I think Pittsburgh's defense did make some plays. I mean, they had an interception off Lamar, and they were able to force a fumble on him that they weren't able to recover, and they also, I think, forced a fumble on a punt that they were not able to recover. So they are, forcing the ball onto the ground. They are able to get some interceptions. So I think the defense can do enough. And I think, it's still a storyline that Lamar has struggled in the playoffs throughout his career. You talked about that Houston game last year. Outside of the Houston game, though, it has not been pretty. He still has an overall 2-4 record in the playoffs. He only has 2 games during that 6-game stretch where he has multiple touchdowns combined in any of those games. So I think overall it is still it's just been a struggle for him. I know he has looked phenomenal during the regular season again, but for whatever reason, I think it's still something that he has to prove to us that he can perform in the playoffs consistently. And, to bet a big number like 8.5, 9.5, whatever it is, I don't know. It's just a lot for a guy who hasn't consistently proven himself in the playoffs. And then don't forget, Zay Flowers ruled out in this game with a knee injury, so you're missing one of your top receiving threats. They still have a ton of other guys, whether it's Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, whoever it is. So I don't think it's going to be that's not a deal breaker for me in terms of betting on Baltimore. It's just, I don't know. It feels a little cliche, but it's a divisional game, 9.5 points. Mike Tomlin, if I had to make a pick, I would go with Pittsburgh just because the number is too big. But again, I would stay away. I just don't feel comfortable either way on this one with the number so big.
Yeah, and I think we make money either way when you go and you talk about it being either a big spread and you get it at the 10 number, or if you find a lower one and you can get it at 8.5. I mean, like you said, the playoff history is something to be concerned about. The Zay Flowers injury is something to be concerned about. One of the reasons I'm a little bit less concerned, and we'll actually lean over here to some of the props, which is interesting. Let's see if I can find. Yes. Okay. So Mark Andrews is one that I'm also going to be targeting in this one. One of the reasons being is because not necessarily at receiving yards. I actually like him more to catch a touchdown. He's had touchdown in the last 6 games. A lot of it comes with his exceptional red zone usage for the Ravens here. And one of the things that we've seen Mark Andrews excel at is playing against single high coverages, middle of the field closed coverages. That's something that he took advantage of quite a bit over the down the stretch of the end of the season, especially in the red zone. They love to take advantage of when one safety is kind of trying to play the middle there in the red zone and they get him to go one way and he literally just leaks up the seam and catches a ball right in front of his face. So they love to do that. They did that against the Steelers the last time they played. I think that that's probably one of the best bets that you can get out of this game. I think I got it at 115. So go ahead and go try to see what you can't get a Mark Andrews touchdown at. I would really love that. I think 47.5 is too high for yardage. I'll just be upfront right now. I don't know what they're going to do potentially. Obviously, there's still those opportunities. The injury to Zay Flowers is a question. When we get to tight ends, like 47 might seem like a low number in general in the grand scheme of receiving yards. I mean, we have guys on here with much higher numbers. Or, I mean, when you look at this, 53.5 receiving yards for George Pickens, 47.5 for Mark Andrews. I think that the disparity there is not quite where it should be, frankly. So I would lean away from maybe the yards, hit him with a touchdown. I think you'll end up cashing where you want to on this one as well. Another thing that I'm liking is the over 43.5 here. I think that when we saw what the Ravens have been able to do defensively, like you said, they had that pick six the last time these two teams played. They had the really ugly pick, or the Steelers had that really ugly pick that the Ravens ended up converting. And when we see that, I think the potential for this game to go over such a low number like 43.5 is very reasonable, especially given how absolutely explosive the Baltimore Ravens have been. I think when you really do look at it, you're going to get a very similar game to last time, unfortunately. I think you're going to get somewhere between the 28 to 30 range, just because that's really what Baltimore's been doing. And then you need roughly 13, 14. I think it's going to be probably closer to like 30 to 20, 30 to 17, something like that, 30 to whatever. So,
yeah, it feels like this is going to come down to, it's either going to be like the first matchup where it was just a defensive slugfest where nobody played well, or it's going to be a Baltimore blowout and they're going to put up a ton of points. So it feels like there's not really in between there.
Exactly. That's exactly what it feels like. And when you do, and you bring up a good point, because when you do take into the context, that first game that they played in Pittsburgh was a brawl, was an absolute brawl. 18-16, a heavy hitting game. Points were hard to come by. And a lot of what that game came down to was actually missed field goals, if I recall.
I think Tucker was still in his phase where he was just missing.
Yeah, everything. And he was just missing everything. So that was one of those games. And I think when you do look at kind of the steps that they've taken since then, and that this is going to be a home game, I think we can lean closer to it being that game where it was in Baltimore, where they were absolutely blew out the Steelers, especially just given the Steelers' recent struggles. Like, Pittsburgh media and other NFL media are also talking about how this team should flip back to Justin Fields for the playoffs. And I know that that's just media rumbling and whatever, it's a slow day, I guess, for the media, or they have to have something to talk about technically. But I don't necessarily know if that's the right way to go. I know that Russell Wilson hasn't been great necessarily, but when you do look at some of his numbers, like he has a 20-7 big time throw rate to turnover worthy play rate. Granted, 4 of those turnover worthy plays have come in his last 3 games. Well, so have 6 of those big time throws. So as much as he is committing some crucial mistakes, and actually, funnily enough, 2 of those turnover worthy plays did come against the Ravens. He also had 2 big time throws in that game. So if they're able to get this, and another big key for this one, if George Pickens is able to keep a cool head and not throw his helmet on the ground and not yell at
big right now, unfortunately.
Yeah. So if he's able to do that, stay in the game, stay locked in, produce for them, like that's what they need. They need a guy that's going to catch the ball at will and give this team the momentum that they need and not get frustrated at everything. So that's the way that I lean. Baltimore 9.5, over 43.5. V is leaning Pittsburgh potentially. It's one of his kind of stay away games, but if you really are liking something, try to get Pittsburgh as high as you can on that one, because at the end of the day, it is a divisional game. So that is another good, and that's going to be there are really good games on the slate, and we're going to break into one here in a second that I'm really excited about, but for other reasons, for very personal and selfish reasons. But I think that this is going to end up being probably one of the more fun matchups to watch. It's going to be a lot of bad blood. So sorry to flashbang everybody every single time. Let's see. Did I get all of them? Only half of them worked. That's okay. All right.
All good.
Here we go. No more flashbangs. So,
Let's do it.
The Broncos are back, baby.
Oh
The
my
Broncos
goodness.
are back. I believed and it happened. No, but for real, Broncos making the playoffs. It has been a long time. The last time they made the playoffs, they won Super Bowl 50. That was almost a decade ago. It feels like forever. And here we go. We're breaking down a Broncos playoff game. I don't even know what to do with myself, V. I am in shambles right now. Broncos heading into Buffalo to take on the Bills. This is a huge spread in this one. About 8.5 or 9 points, depending on where you're shopping. Game total on this one, about 47.5 points. V.
Yeah.
What is there to say? But the Broncos are back, baby. Denver finished the regular season tied for the NFL's best cover rate with the Chargers and a couple other teams at 70.6%, 12-5 against the spread. But something does need to be said. All 5 of those failed covers came as road dogs. That's not a good look for this game. And unfortunately, that is going to lean both of us to probably stay away from the point spread in this one and probably lean more towards the game total. Reason being, when we look at what the Broncos have done, while they have a great trend of 12-5, something that we talk about often is what have you done for me lately? We can't always go back to previous years for trends and say, hey, this is the trend for the Broncos in these past years, or this is the trend for the Bills in these past years, because that stuff doesn't matter because it's a completely different team. But a very similar sentiment goes when we talk about, oh, this team covered all these games in the front half of the season. But when we look at their recent trends, they really sputtered there at the end. 2 failed covers against playoff teams, and then they only covered, 38-0 against the Chiefs B team. I don't know if that necessarily breeds confidence or breeds excitement or breeds stability in what we want to look for a team that does potentially need to cover a 9.5 point or a 9-point spread. So I'm potentially going to be leaning away from that, V. And I know that you're probably going to be leaning away from that as well. And when we talk about what Buffalo has done for them, they are a team that is one of the top 4 teams in betting odds to take the Super Bowl. They're at about plus 600 right now. That's a very similar price that you can go and get Baltimore at. So depending on if you like either of those teams, maybe you'll sprinkle a little bit in before the playoff games start. But when we look at what Buffalo is, when they lay a sizable number of points, like 9 that they are this game, or 8.5, technically, depending on where you shop, when they're favored by 6 or more points, they've only managed a 3-3 spread. So it's a little bit iffy on which way the trends lean for this one. And I don't know that I'm necessarily going to jump into that. But I mean, man, Josh Allen is nuts in the wild card round. Like, I don't think it gets talked about enough. He's 4-1 in the wild card, and his overall grade, his overall PFF grade, 91.3. This man is an absolute menace. So I don't know. I think that at the end of the day, when we talk about what the Chargers were going to do, I think you also have to say the same thing about Buffalo here. Josh Allen's going to be the best player on the field. And if Denver is going to keep this game close enough to cover, they are really going to have to figure something out with him, which has been an issue before in the past. So I don't know. I think they're going to want to get the run game started, but I'm going to go ahead and go at the over on 47.5. And V, I know that you're leaning that way as well. What are you seeing when we talk about the game total for this one?
Yeah, it seems a couple of points too low, in my opinion. I think 47.5 is a great number to be able to take an over at. I think both offenses are just absolutely cruising right now. The Bills have scored 30 or more points in 9 out of the last 10 games where Josh Allen, played and wasn't, I know he started last week technically, but obviously he came out after 1 snap. So not counting that game, and 9 of their previous 10 games, they have scored 30 or more points. And then one where they didn't score over 30 points, they still had 24 points. So it's not like this offense has, in the past 3 months, they have not faltered whatsoever. It's primarily because of Josh Allen what he's been able to do. And also, the rushing game has been fairly solid. James Cook had a monster season this year. So their offense is totally clicking. And then Denver's offense has also been just phenomenal recently. 24 or more points in 7 straight games, including 3 games where they scored 38 or more points. So it just seems like both sides are clicking. I know Denver has some solid pieces on defense, but like we mentioned when talking about the Chargers, there have been plenty of games this year where their defense has not been able to slow down opposing offenses for whatever reason, whether it was against Cleveland on that Monday night, whether it was against the Chargers on Sunday night. They've had plenty of opportunities or games where their defense has just not been able to, play up to the challenge of the opposing offenses. And this could be a similar situation here in Buffalo where Josh Allen just goes nuclear like he normally does and just has a monster game. I do think Denver can stay competitive, though. There's no reason for me to believe that they can. I don't think Buffalo's defense is anything, unstoppable or anything that they can't break down every now and then and put up their fair share of points too. So I think this could easily be a 1-possession game, but it's just a lot of points on both sides of the ball. So give me the over at 47.5.
Yeah, and when you talk about like the spread, the games where Denver has been 8 or more favorites is early on against the Jets, which obviously was a mispricing because the Jets were not the team that everybody thought they were going to be early in the year. And then about mid-season, week 9, when they headed into Baltimore, and I took a lump on this one as well and lost 41-10.
Yeah.
So that's a tough look. Yeah, trounced. +9 in that game. So a similar one to this in a similar makeup on the road against a really good playoff team that's kind of favored to, go. It's a tough draw. It's something that we're going to really need to kind of see play out. And maybe that's something to attack the live line on, depending on which way they drop it to and how the game starts. That might be a good way to spin it. But when we also talk about where the Broncos can get points in this one in order to facilitate this over, it really comes down to the Bills' kind of subpar secondary, to be honest. Christian Benford's been great. He's been excellent, one of the best corners in the league. Everybody else has been below replacement level in terms of coverage grades, which is a tough draw. This team has the 31st ranked coverage defense per our friends over at PFF. That is tough. That is a really bad look. So at the end of the day, that's why a lot of Buffalo's games, especially against some really talented offenses. You have the game against the Rams. You have the game against Detroit where there's 80, 90 points scored. So that's where we lean on this game being priced just like maybe, honestly, like 1.5 or 2 points lower than it really should have been. I think that this game should have been one of those that's up in the 49.5 range. Yeah. And if you want to get the over, you'd have to get it at 50. That's really where I think that I would have priced the game at. But we're looking at 47.5, and we're going to go ahead and take advantage of that. Click the over. You're going to like it. I think it's going to end up working out very reasonably as well. So anything else you're seeing in this game, V? Anything else that we didn't touch on?
Potentially the weather, not something I've looked into, unfortunately, yet. It's a little early, but I think that could be a reason why this number is perhaps set as low as it is, just because it is Buffalo, it is January. Weather could play a factor. So if you guys have a chance, just take a look at that and see if there's anything crazy going on this weekend in this game. If not, then just take the over, I think.
Oh, hi, kitty cat. Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be a good one. Another thing that I'm potentially liking is because we talked about that issue with the Bills coverage unit. I think that you could also go ahead and try to get in on a Bo Nix over 1.5 passing touchdowns potentially. That might be a good idea to target because the script also kind of leans that way. If you're thinking that Buffalo is going to probably have a huge lead, I mean, this is an 8.5 point spread. What you can do is you can mitigate your potential losses on taking the game total or the over and going ahead and taking some of these passing props that the Broncos are going to have to get in order to stay competitive in this one. And one of the ones that I'm liking is 1.5 passing touchdowns for Bo Nix. I got it at about 140, at about plus 140. So something that's a nice little cushion there should they go down and you need to make up some points.
That's a great number to get at 2 plus 140, especially because I think Nix has had 2+ touchdowns in quite a few consecutive games.
Yeah. He's actually, let me take a look at, he has had 21 of his 29 touchdown passes have come over the span since week 10 onward.
Okay.
And he's managed to surpass 1.5 scores in 7 out of 8 matchups. So
That's pretty good. Yeah.
that's a pretty good track record there. And like I said, 42.9. I just actually looked at my notes that I did have it. 42.9 was the team coverage grade for Buffalo this year. And that's also including one of the best, highest rated corners in the NFL in Christian Benford. So take that for what you will.
Yeah, tough.
But that wraps it. Okay, we're just going to cross our fingers for a second. We're going to say a little prayer, and we're going on to the next game. All right. So the first game, that was the first game of the Sunday slate. The second game of the Sunday slate here is going to be Green Bay heading into Philly to take on the Eagles. Eagles here, about 4.5. It looks like this game has moved a little bit. What did I write this down at? 4.5 or 5.5. So no, never mind. Looks like you could potentially shop around and get it a few different numbers. I saw it at 5. That's where we took it at. Game total on this one, 45.5 points. I know you have a lean towards the game total here. Personally, myself, I'm also liking Philly. A lot of it just comes down to Green Bay's a little bit banged up. Jordan Love throwing elbow. He's got some issues. Christian Watson just tore his knee. That's a big blow to this offense, even though I've kind of known as not being the biggest Christian Watson truther. This is just a tough look for a Green Bay team who has struggled down the stretch. Let me see how many games did they end up losing. They ended up losing their last 2, failing to cover both of those, but that's a longer stretch. In December, they went 2-2-1 against the spread, and I don't know that that's going to get it done when we want to see it. Sorry, let me check here. Jason, let's see what Jason had to say. Jason said Bateman plus 50 receiving yards is minus 110. Just saying, that's great. That's excellent. And especially when we talk about how Bateman has done, Bateman is one of the best separators in the NFL. And I just don't think that teams, people know about it. Fans know about it. Bateman's separation numbers are second to none. He is one of the best separators in the NFL. I think it was like 68% separation rate on routes that require it. So I definitely agree with you. No Zay Flowers. I think you're going to get a lot more from Bateman there as well. And Isaiah likely, Jason likes at plus 25 receiving yards is minus 170. Minus 170 is kind of a price that
I was going to say, I don't like the juice on that number. I mean, if you can get it plus 25 at a better number than minus 170, then maybe, but tough.
Yeah, so definitely shop around if you're liking something like that. I like it. And like I said, I think Mark Andrews is definitely going to be in for a nice little red zone usage as well. But if you guys need even more bets, make sure you hit us up in Discord. ImportantNonsense.com. That's how you become a member, get access to our Discord. You can ask us all of your questions regarding any of our picks, regarding any of the stuff that you're targeting this week. We're happy to help with whatever we can. And also our guy, Jason Draven, the best fantasy analyst in the industry. Also, he gets his beak wet with a little bit of betting here and there too as well. So go check him out. He's got a lot of great picks too, and he's going to be dropping some in our Discord as well over there. So make sure you hit him up, ask him any of your questions too as well. Thank you, Jason. We appreciate it. Back to the topic at hand. We were talking about Green Bay, right? Let me readjust where I got here. The biggest cover of Green Bay season also came just a few weeks ago, but that was the 34-0 game against the Saints team that, to be honest, I don't know that they could win the national championship in college football this year. That's how struggling and how tough that it was for them. Yeah. And when we come into an Eagles team who is now getting healthier, they're going to get Jalen Hurts back. I know that there's some kind of facetious notion that that's a downgrade for them getting Jalen Hurts back. That's not a downgrade for them, you guys. This guy was an MVP candidate a few years ago. I understand that there's some reservations about his ability to do full field reads and his ability to operate a more complex offense, but that's water under a bridge when you have a team that is as talented top to bottom as the Eagles. And when you have a defense that's played as well as the Eagles, one of the reasons why the Eagles are one of the top teams, I know they faltered towards the end of the season and didn't end up getting the number 1 seed like they wanted, but we have to still understand and take this team into context. They have one of the best secondaries in the NFL. They have Cooper DeJean, who is one of the highest rated slot corners in the NFL. They have Quinyon Mitchell, who has played exceptionally well in his first year as well. And then you have Darius Slay. So, I mean, you have a group of dudes who have played now almost for a full complete season. They're even better in communication, and they are absolutely playing their hearts out. So I am of the mind of thinking that I like whatever this Eagles defense is doing a lot more than whatever I like of what Green Bay's offense could potentially give us with a busted elbow Jordan Love and one less receiving option with no Christian Watson. I know that this team is going to want to run the ball a ton with Josh Jacobs, and so is Philly, which is why I think we both lean towards the game total on this one being under. What are you seeing when you see this under on this one? Anything else that I potentially missed on there, or what are you tracking on that?
No, I think you just hit it right there at the end, talking about the rushing for both teams. I think that's the big reason why I would lean towards the under at 45.5 in this one. You mentioned it, both quarterbacks coming off injuries. Hurts was in the concussion protocol. He has been fully cleared, though, and he is ready to go. Jordan Love hurt his elbow last week in Week 18. He has also been cleared and ready to go. But, given that these quarterbacks are coming off, somewhat serious injuries, I would expect both offenses to rely on their rushing attacks, primarily because their rushing attacks have been very, very good this year. Good. Both teams rank in the top 5 in rushing yards per game, and they both rank in the top 6 in yards per attempt. So they've been both very efficient on the ground. They both paid big, big money for these running backs just this past offseason. The returns have been great, and I would expect this is a time when you really want to rely on them. This is why you got them, was because playoff football outdoors in January in Philly, I'm sure the conditions are not going to be great. This is a time when you want to rely on these bell cow running backs. So I expect tons and tons of carries in this game. If you want to start looking at some props, I might just take some unders on passing attempts for both Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts. I think that would probably be a good way to go, because I just don't imagine, I can't imagine either coach not riding the hot hand in their running backs who've been so productive all year. So I think I definitely like the under. Both defenses are playing well, especially Philly. Spread feels a little high for me in terms of Philly -5, -5.5, where we're getting it. I might lean towards Green Bay just because I know LaFleur is a genius. He'll find some ways for this offense to become efficient against a good Philly defense, and I think Jordan Love is capable of making big time plays when needed. So I might lean towards Green Bay on the spread, but I definitely like the under at 45.5 in this one.
Yeah, I think it definitely takes moderating the elbow the elbow for Jordan Love. Throwing elbow, it just I worry that any motion, like any certain, like he might be good for like, I don't know, let's call it 13 dropbacks, and then something hits or he lands on it wrong, and all of a sudden he suffers the setback and gets knocked out of the game. That's a worry for me with this one. I'm not so much worried that Jalen Hurts is going to like experience another concussion. But what that does also entail is, like you said, some of these passing props, especially on attempts or completions, those would be good ones to go to. It doesn't look like they have those listed on here, but you can obviously find them at any of your sports books. But this reinforces exactly what you're saying. The 220 pass yards is the line for both of them. 224 for Jalen Hurts, 220 for Jordan Love, which is a little bit surprising, but I think that shows you with Jordan Love having a lower one, you would expect that elbow to potentially be an issue. And that actually brings up another question on the other side. We have Jalen Hurts. He is coming off a concussion. One of these things that is going to be a key matchup in this game is going to be A.J. Brown, and Xavier McKinney is so lights out. Did he make the All-Pro team this year?
He must have. I think he led the league in interceptions, right? So,
him and Kirby Joseph were absolutely fantastic, and I know that Kirby Joseph got kind of snubbed for the Pro Bowl. Xavier McKinney made the Pro Bowl, but I mean, both extremely, extremely talented safeties. But a lot of the times, McKinney got slightly overshadowed. And when I do say that, I don't say that. Well, maybe overshadowed isn't the right word. I don't think offenses took him quite seriously enough that if you put the ball in his range, he's going to take it away from you.
Right.
And he did it at a high clip. And I think a similar thing when you ask about Jalen Hurts having a concussion, he might not make a certain read correctly right off the rip. He might try to throw a deep ball to A.J. Brown, and that could turn the tide of the game if Xavier McKinney goes ahead and takes that away, because he has been fantastic, but so has A.J. Brown. So that's going to be one of the matchups to watch. And whoever wins that one in the passing game, I think gives their team the leg up to take home this victory. Because like you said, this game is going to probably be a little bit closer if Jordan Love is okay. That's kind of my biggest draw for this. They're going to run the ball a lot, but they got to have his elbow be at least decent enough to throw a 15-yard crosser or something like that. So that's one of the ways I'm leaning. And then another that you could potentially get lower. Let's see if it's even on here. I don't see it on. Let's see. Oh, we can find the other one. See, we never used this during the season, V, and I just figured out that it exists, and I'm excited about that.
Nice.
Let's see. And it still doesn't have it. Okay. One of the ones that I found here, though, was Saquon Barkley in receiving yards. You can get him at 10.5, which is a much lower number considering that for the last 3 weeks, they didn't really throw him the ball at all. And that was because they were chasing him getting to 2K. So every touch was going to be on the ground. We're not wasting our touches, giving him the ball in the air. Go ahead and give him the ball on the ground, and that's how we're going to get him his number. And he did just barely make his number thanks to the 17-game season. But when you talk about how they used him functionally within this offense, they love to throw him the ball. I think a lot of people forget that backwards hurdle over a dude was off of a pass, was off of a little bubble, was off of a little, outlet. Yeah. So they're going to go ahead and get him his targets. 10.5 is not that much. This is a severely underpriced overreaction to his recent receiving numbers. And somebody's model is messed up when they decided to set that line. So that's where I'm at. And when you really talk about why I'm leaning Philly for the spread as well, I mean, Philly's one of the top 5 teams against the spread. They went 11-6 this year, and they excel in situations where they lay fewer than 6 points. They're 6-3 against the spread. But the questions remain about how well they can cover at the link when they're at home. They're only 4-4 against the spread. So yeah, and I mean, it's tough. We can look back at the last time these teams played, and that was back actually in week 1. There are 2 week 1 rematches on Wildcard weekend. Isn't that incredible? So crazy. This game and the next game, I'm pretty sure. So
this was the Brazil game, week 1. That was that Friday night opener that we had. That was the crazy game where the turf, I think, caused a lot of issues. Guys were slipping left and right.
Jordan Love went down in that game as well. So, and when we talk about that, the Eagles ended up winning straight up and covering as 1.5 point. I guess technically they were home favorites, but it was in Brazil. So, so that's the way that one's going to go. I like them. If you can get them even lower, for me, again, the big draw is Green Bay's health. I think that's got to be the big draw. So
for sure.
I'm liking the Eagles to cover here, and we are both liking the the under at 45.5. So I think that's going to also be. I really want Jordan Love to be okay, because this could be a really good game if he is.
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. I think this is going to be a fun game to watch.
Yeah. So next game on the list here, we have Washington heading into Tampa to take on the Buccaneers. Bucks -3-point favorites here at home. Game total on this one, a whopping 50 points. Tell me which way you're leaning on this one. I know that you're liking some of the game total, but give me your read on this game as a whole.
Yeah, very, very interesting game. I think you mentioned it just now. This was also a rematch from week 1. This was Jaden Daniels' first start, and Tampa Bay just blew them out. Baker had a phenomenal game. I think he had 4 touchdowns in that one. Jaden struggled throwing the ball, but I think he was able to get a couple of garbage time rushing touchdowns in this game. But obviously, Washington's a completely different team. They've improved drastically from where they were in week 1. Obviously, their offense is humming, whether Jaden Daniels is clearly going to be in contention for Offensive Rookie of the Year, probably going to win it. The rushing attack has been very good. Terry McLaurin had a career year this year in terms of touchdowns. I think he broke a franchise record in terms of receiving touchdowns. So everything just went as well as you could have possibly hoped for Washington's offense. And then on the flip side, Tampa Bay's offense, as good as impressed as we were with Baker and that crew last year, they've gotten even better. And I've harped on it weeks in a row now, and I'm going to continue to do so. Just so impressed with the rushing attack and what they've been able to do there. I know they struggled last week against New Orleans. I think they weren't able to find the space that they normally were, but overall, I have no concerns with Tampa Bay's rushing attack going forward, and I think it's going to be a big help for them in this game, and that's a big reason why I'm liking the over in this game. I know it's a big number at 50, but I think it's very, very doable. Both offenses are just putting up points in bunches right now. Both teams rank in the top 5 in points scored, and they both rank in the top 5 in rushing yards per game and yards per carry. Tampa Bay is also third in passing yards, so their offense is just clicking on both rushing and passing. Both defenses have had their struggles this year. Tampa Bay is giving up the 4th most passing yards per game, and Washington is giving up the 3rd most rushing yards per game. So there are definitely leaks in both defenses that both offenses can exploit, and I think that's going to definitely help to carry this over in terms of hitting 50. Big matchup I'm watching is something we've talked about a lot in previous years, rekindled but in different uniforms. Marshawn Lattimore versus Mike Evans.
Let's
Obviously,
go.
this was that crazy divisional situation when Lattimore was on the Saints. Now he moves over to Washington. He has been banged up this year, and he has missed quite a lot of action. So not sure he's going to be fully 100%, up to speed. He is playing, but seems like he's not going to be 100%. So going to be very interesting to watch to see if he can continue his, shadowing and shutdown of Mike Evans as he has done in the past. But yeah, very interesting matchup, but I still very much like the over in this game at 50.
Yeah, Marshawn wants to play Marshawn is going to play until the hammy tears off of the bone if it means he gets to face Mike Evans one more time. And I cannot stress this enough. This very well may be the last time we ever see Mike Evans face off with Marshawn Lattimore. And I cannot wait to see it happen. Obviously, the biggest bad blood rivalry in the NFL between two specific players. I don't know of two players that hate each other more than these two guys. So I'm really, really excited to get into that too as well. And, when you talk about those two guys, Evans has been fantastic. He's got an 89 grade this season, is 4th highest among all receivers. He's been absolutely fantastic. He ranks 8th in target rate when facing man coverage. And that's something that they do a lot there in Washington, especially that's why they went out and got Marshawn Lattimore. They want to play more man coverage. And when they have him back, they try to play more man coverage. They just don't have the bodies in other places, which is a tough look for a team when you really need all 5 guys to really lock in and cover up really well. But Washington plays that at a top 5 clip. I think Mike Evans is going to go ahead and take advantage of that as much as they can. We do have to talk about Marshawn Lattimore. He's been hurt a little bit. Who knows if the hamstring is going to play an issue? He's obviously letting spite take over here and saying that he's going to play no matter what because obviously of the matchup. But when we talk about some of the other things, you talked about how Washington has allowed a ton of rushing yards. Not only that, they are 30th in the NFL in yards before contact per rush at 1.8. When you talk about that, backs usually eat that up and then some. So when we're seeing what you're going to get from Bucky, what you're going to get from Rashad, I love potentially getting Rashad right now. He is way underpriced. You're going to love it. 28 total rushing and receiving yards is his line in this game. That is a vast overreaction to him getting 0 touches last week. And I don't know why. Is there something I missed? Did he punch somebody in the face? Did he break a toe that nobody knows about? I have no idea. All I know is that this game is severely mispriced for White. When we talk about how good he's been, even on limited touches, as Bucky Irving has kind of taken control of the backfield, he's managed to exceed this line in all but 2 games. And one of them was last week when he did not get a touch. So I am fully comfortable taking him at over 28 rushing and receiving yards. I think he'll potentially have it on both sides. So that's where I lean as well. And one of the things we talked about was the game total here, over 50, obviously 2 really high powered offenses. I think that when you say how good Washington's been and how much they've stepped forward, they had that little stretch there where they weren't quite as dominant as they were early on in the season. But they have picked it up. They're off 5 straight wins, 3-2 against the spread over that span. So it's something that we're going to technically want to see play out more. But I really do like the way that they're going. I mean, when you look at it on its head, both of these teams cover double-digit games. So it is a game that is between two teams that betting markets have loved this season. It really just depends on who can carry that momentum forward, frankly. So one of the way that I'm leaning is Tampa Bay at the 3. Obviously, same rules apply. If you can get it under the 3, I love it even more. If you get it over the 3 and don't get that push value, you might go ahead and shop around or maybe stay away, get it from a different place. But that's the way that I'm leaning, over 50. Anything else we didn't touch in this one?
No, I think you covered everything. I think it's just going to be an explosive game. Both offenses are going to be able to kind of do whatever they want on this one. So super excited. This is going to be a very fun capper for the Sunday slate.
Yeah, I agree. So the last game of Wild Card weekend, the Vikings wish that they weren't here, but unfortunately they didn't take care of business in week 18. And that was a bummer. They absolutely got slapped around by a strong Lions team. And we may end up seeing that next week. I think, right? I think they if they win.
If Minnesota were to win, and assuming, other favorites win in the NFC, then yeah, this would be Minnesota back at Detroit next week.
Yes. So here we go. Minnesota heading into LA to take on the Rams, -2.5 on the road here. Now, that doesn't seem super crazy on its surface, but when you go back and look, these two teams played this year, and it was not as this would indicate. So the Rams actually won that game, and here we go, hosting their playoff game. Game total on this one, 48 points, depending on where you're shopping. I mean, V, what are you making of this one? I'm interested because I got a little hesitant. This Rams team has been improved, but the Vikings have been one of my favorite teams to bet all season. What are you seeing in this matchup?
Yeah, well, first, interestingly enough, this is now becoming a neutral site game because, of course, the news came out yesterday that this game got moved to Arizona because of the fires in LA. So technically, neutral site game where the Rams were still considered the home team, but I don't know if that necessarily is going to have any impact on the spread here because I think both teams will have enough time to prepare for this move because it was announced yesterday. But yeah, very, very interesting matchup. I think if you had talked about this game prior to what we saw last week on Sunday night with Sam Darnold, I think the spread would have been higher. I think this could have been like a 3.5, 4-point spread in favor of Minnesota. But I think what we saw with Darnold in that game is kind of scaring people off, and I understand it. I'm also leaning towards the Rams in this one to cover and win this one outright. I think you talked about their first matchup. The Rams dominated Minnesota. That was that Thursday night game. Puka was just coming back from his injury that caused him to miss a few weeks. They won 30-20. Stafford had 4 touchdowns, and the team ran for over 100 yards. So very, very good day offensively. I think, interestingly, though, the Rams offense has been fairly shaky recently, not including last week where Matthew Stafford didn't play, but the 3 games before that, the Rams have scored less than 20 points in each of those 3 games. But they won all of those games. So I think this team has shown that they can win in multitudes of ways. They can win in highest scoring shootouts. They can also win in defensive struggles. And a lot of that has to do with the phenomenal drafting that they've done on that side of the ball. Obviously, Jared Verse has had a monster year. I think he's the front runner for defensive rookie of the year. He could have another big game in this one. And give Darnold trouble. I mentioned it, very, very tough game last week on Sunday night, 18 for 41. Just 166 passing yards, no touchdowns, going up against a Rams defense that allowed 24 total points in their last 3 games where they did not rest their starter. So if you take out last week against Seattle, the 3 previous games, the Rams defense allowed 24 total points. Now, again, going up against offenses that weren't great. One, I think they went up against San Fran on a short week. They ran up against the Jets and the Cardinals, teams who weren't playing for anything. I think this Minnesota team is obviously significantly better, but I think it just goes to show you that this Rams defense can put up very, very solid performances. So I just think overall I trust Stafford more than I trust Darnold, and I think they have so many great weapons still in Puka and Kupp and Kyron Williams and all those guys. So give me the Rams as underdogs in this game at +2 or wherever you guys are getting that line.
Yeah. So, and I like what you're saying there too. And when you talk about like their recent against the spread trends, the Rams have still been really good. The only game that they failed to cover was that 13-9 game in week 17 against the Cardinals. They were 6.5-point favorites at home. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on. But I mean, when you look at what we saw from Detroit or from Minnesota, Minnesota is 4-2 against the spread since the start of December. And oddly enough, the same team that they didn't cover against, not including the Lions, the same team they didn't cover against was Arizona. So it's a little bit of an odd one. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head. What we saw out of them in Detroit in a must-win game to go 31-9 and fail to cover as +3 on that one is a really, really tough look. I know that Detroit and LA aren't necessarily the same like caliber of team, but it's something that we do need to monitor moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, getting stuffed by a Detroit Lions team, you have to give that unit credit, but that is a unit that is severely injured still.
Yes.
Especially in the secondary, and for you to have as much struggle, especially in the red zone that they had. I think they had multiple red zone fourth down failures in that game, and that's just because Darnold could not find open receivers, and you're going up against, again, a depleted secondary. I think Terry Arnold got hurt in that game and still were not able to have success. That is concerning, to say the least.
Yeah, down both of your starting corners because why am I who broke their
Carlton
jaw?
Davis.
Yeah, Carlton Davis broke his jaw.
Mm-hmm.
So down both corners, can't make it happen. That's a tough draw. And I honestly think that earned Aaron Glenn like the Saints job. I think he's probably going to get the Saints job off of that performance alone.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, somebody has to take the Saints job. So anyway, so yes. So you are leaning at about the +2 range, but it looks like we can get it at anywhere between +2.5, +3 potentially. That's where you're at. We're going a little head to head here. I'm going to keep riding out the Vikings. I want to take them. I think that I want them to at least win this here playoff game and cement how good of a season they had. I'm going to go ahead and get them I got them earlier at -2. So now that this game has moved, I believe that the line has shifted just a little bit. It's at about 2.5 now. I still like it there. I could probably be a little bit more hesitant at 3.5. Like we talked about, the push value there at 3, but I'm way more comfortable with it being under that 3 line. And then another thing we do have to talk about is under 48 or under 47.5. I think that's also a pretty strong read, just given how strong the Vikings defense has been for most of the season. We talked about some of the offensive struggles from the Rams. That's going to be something that is going to play a part, but the same thing goes in the inverse. The Sam Darnold struggles and the way that the Rams have kind of won these close games. Like you said, they kept 3 opponents in December under 10 points. And I get that this was San Francisco with nothing to play for. The Jets are the Jets and the Cardinals, but 2 of those games were on the road. I think when you talk about road games, it's still a value and it still validates their process. So I like the under on this one at 48. That is just a huge number. 48 is a very big number. So I'm liking the under on that one. And let's see. Did anything that we miss in this one? I think I had a prop for this one that I was liking too. Oh yeah. Okay. So 1 to monitor. It's not one that I love, but it's 1 to monitor is Cooper Kupp going over 46.5 receiving yards. I know that seems tough. Kupp hasn't been very good.
What do you make of Cooper Kupp's lack of productivity over the last few weeks? What is going on there? Because I can't figure that one out. That's been a head scratcher for me.
It's a scheme. It's a scheme thing.
It's a scheme thing. Okay.
It's a scheme thing. The Puka targets and the Puka route tree and the Puka kind of looks are what Kupp used to run a lot of, and that's just the fact of the matter. And Puka is just younger and better at it. That's it. And now they run Kupp a lot out of the slot. They run him a lot out of the Z, and now it's not like he's unfamiliar with it and bad at it. It's just the offense dictates the ball go elsewhere. So sometimes it's a little bit of a draw, and yeah, he's been really bad. But one of the things that he has excelled at is actually taking Byron Murphy's lunch money, which is who he will see a lot of this week. So in his 86 career receiving snaps against Byron Murphy, Kupp has 267 receiving yards. Granted, that comes in a little bit of a different scheme, and he had 3.1 yards per route run. Again, it's a little bit of a different use of him in the scheme, but I think this is a very reasonable number for him to hit. They're going to need him. They are going to need to give him the ball to some degree. He's going to need to catch a few key third downs for them if they want to win this game. So that's one of the ways I'm leaning. It might not be my favorite bet of the week just because Cup has not been very good down the stretch or frankly most of the year. So that's the way that I'm leaning on it too. V, anything that we missed in this one? It's the last game.
No, I think we covered. This is also going to be, I think, a great game, great way to cap off a wildcard weekend. So nice job on the scheduling here.
It's definitely going to be a good one. And of course, safe, prayers or safe wishes to everybody in the LA area dealing with the wildfires. That's obviously a very scary situation. So please, everybody take care of your families, take care of your people, and make sure you're all good. So thank you guys so much for coming. That does it. That wraps us up. That is the end of the wild card weekend breakdown. It was fun. It was a good one. We've waited all season for this, V. This is the best time. We are back potentially same time next week. Everybody stay tapped in. We're going to have the schedule changing next week just because of traveling and the playoff schedule and stuff, just kind of how we did this week. But stay tapped in over in our Discord, importantnonsense.com, to become a member. That's how you get access. You can ask all of us your betting questions, ask us any questions about what you're targeting, ask us for our picks. That's where those are going to be. Hit up Jason for who you need to keep in your keeper league and all that good jazz. Yeah, so hit us up. And I think that about does it. V, any parting words for the folks at home?
Just like you said, definitely hop into the Discord. Fantasy seasons are over across the board, so make sure you guys are focusing your attentions on the betting stuff now for the rest of the playoffs, because it's going to be a great time, making a lot of money over here. So just come on, hop in, post your picks, ask us about our picks, all those kind of things, and we'll have a great time this weekend. So, yeah, enjoy Wildcard weekend, and can't wait to do it again next week.
Can't wait to do it again next week. We're going to have some more heavy hitters on the slate. Can't wait to see it break down. And until next time, everybody, good night. Good luck.